We'll get started in about 2 minutes here. Okay, I think we're going to get started. Welcome, everyone. We are going to talk today about how to build faster with AI. We're going to cover 3 different topic areas. We're going to cover the opportunity to be able to take advantage of core development with GitHub Copilot. We're going to talk about building AI-enabled medium code applications with Copilot Studio. And we'll talk a little bit about Azure AI Studio and how it relates to the general architecture, and then how to take action on it. Introduce ourselves a little bit. My name is Nathan Lesnowski. I'm Concurrency CTO. Been involved with Concurrency for about 22 years now, and spent a lot of time helping customers take advantage of AI. So really excited to have this conversation. And then we also have Brian Hayden. Brian, you want to just introduce yourself a bit?
Yeah, hi Nathan. I haven't been here 22 years, but been here 6 or 7 years, and I'm a solution architect at Concurrency, working a lot in the app development AI space with our customers.
Awesome. And then we also have Ajay. Ajay, do you want to introduce yourself for a minute?
Hey everyone, good morning. So my name is Ajay, and I work mainly on the low-code, no-code side of like the development platform, such as Dynamics 365, Power Platform, and I'm working with Concurrency for almost the past 5 years. So yeah, really looking forward to this webinar.
Awesome. Ajay is going to cover some of the Copilot Studio content, and he's even going to demo some things that I hadn't seen before until he showed it to me this morning. So I'm really excited for you to be able to see the same things. So these are our 3 topics. We're going to spend the majority of the time on the first 2, and try to take it slow. Make sure we go through some content that I think is going to be impactful to you. One thing I want to call out as we get started is make sure you put your questions in the chat. We have 3 of us on this call. We want to make sure we're answering your questions as we go through the content. And if we have to save it to the end, we will. We can do that too. But as you have questions, throw them in the chat. Let's get it going. Let's get the conversation flowing, and make sure that we're helping you as you have those that get popped up. Okay. So first topic we're going to talk about is GitHub Copilot. And this is a technology that is one that was one of the more earlier released AI tools, but has come a long way. And we're going to talk a lot about some of the new capabilities that have been released and are coming over the next year. So as you think about the maturation of development efficiency, I want you to take a good look at this slide. And what you can see is a band that indicates current state capabilities and then future state capabilities. And as you can with any AI solution, there's this transition that's happening from a developer with tools, a developer starting to delegate to an AI agent, and then eventually getting to a completely autonomous agent. So on the far left-hand side, you have a developer that is building applications with no additional tooling other than their IDE. You can even think about it like when you first learn to develop, you're sitting in your high school class using Pascal or GW Basic or something crazy like that, and you're just building and you're taking advantage of what's there, but you don't have these extra tools. Like IntelliSense wasn't even there, and you're like, what do I do with myself that I don't even have IntelliSense? But you can see how as you move into having something like IntelliSense, you immediately have a productivity boost just because you don't have to worry about spelling quite as much. You're able to tab out to the things that are important to you as you're writing. And that's where a lot of developers have sort of left off today. They have a set of tools that they take advantage of, like IntelliSense, but they haven't necessarily made that next jump. So as you're making that next jump, you're seeing a developer start to leverage things like ChatGPT personas. One of our developers, for example, has prepared ChatGPT personas with a whole write-up that says you are a X, you are a cloud architect that answers questions about what the structure of this application as relates to an Azure cloud architecture should look like. And he'll use that as a way to like delegate tasks over to that ChatGPT persona. That gets combined with some of the things we're going to talk about today with Copilot in the developer experience, indicating that you want it to tab out a function or a data structure or a starting point for you to build a certain type of application. But then what got released last year was even the ability to chat with your code base, to chat with your question that you're trying to build. So what should this look like? Can you build this structure for me? Give me the code I need to be able to develop this component of the application. And you're even starting to get to a point where you can kind of delegate in that sense. And then what doesn't exist yet is this spot of truly autonomous agent development. We're kind of at the precipice of that. We're at the precipice of where we're starting to delegate aspects of our attention over to a chat agent to do some work for us, look at it and use it. We haven't yet quite gotten to the point where the agent developer, the AI agent, truly functions as like the intern that I have, like the person I'm giving tasks to that's able to actually build those tasks. That's coming. That's not here yet, but we need to build the skills that get us to that point. So, Brian, like what sticks out to you when you think about some of these different stages?
So, what really sticks out with me is this story about how, as a developer, when I was spending 6 or 8 hours a day, like writing code, in that second slot, developer with IntelliSense. I mean, I would use JetBrains, very religiously in terms of accelerating my development. I want to create a new method. I want to do, some refactoring. It was just a great tool, saved me a ton of time. Once I had it in my toolbox, like I wouldn't let go. And if I went to an organization that didn't have it, I'd buy my own license. And now today, having used Copilot, especially with the chat interface, I feel like this is the new tool. This is what I need in order to get my job done quickly. Even with the chat GPT, there's just the latency of like going between your web browser and your IDE and stuff. All that stuff becomes like seamless. It's integrated within the Copilot chat. I'm really looking forward to the future state, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. In terms of the Copilot Enterprise features that are just about to be released. But I can't imagine doing any development work without using something like Copilot going forward.
So one of the things that I've been thinking about is how Copilot, in a similar sense to what you just said, Brian, is essentially a force multiplier to every developer. Essentially, like I'm a developer pre-IntelliSense, I'm a developer post-IntelliSense. I'm really excited to the point where we start thinking about it like a side developer that has an ability to do X tasks. So one analogy I was using is like my older son can clean the garage. Like I can say, Ethan, go clean the garage, and he'll go do it. Like he'll take everything out of the garage, he'll sweep it out, he'll put everything back in an organized fashion, and it'll look great. My younger son, he can't really do that. He kind of falls into like a jello on the floor when I ask him to clean the garage. He's like, he can't like compute all the tasks necessary to be able to do that. But if I said sweep the garage, that's a task that he can do. Right now, Copilot like has tasks it can do well, has tasks it can't quite do yet. And we're still kind of discovering even like what are all those tasks it can do well, what are all the tasks it can't do. But it's going to keep aging and maturing to a point where it can be like the anti-outsourcing tool. So like right now, it's kind of like a side developer in a really basic sense. It can do certain things. Tell it what you want to write and have it create it. And then that's your first draft. Like one of our colleagues will say, never write a draft again, right? Like use this as a starting point to be able to do certain types of work. And it performs best when you provide clear outlines around what you have to do. Like my older son, he can clean the garage, but like Copilot's not quite there yet. So I'll say, Benedict, go sweep the garage, do this, come back to me when you're done, and I'll give you a new job. That's sort of where Copilot's at right now. Like, I'm going to give you a task to do. I'm going to put my energy somewhere. I'm going to go back to that task, pull that in, and have it completed. Where I think it can get to, and this is like totally the future, is I think it can get to a point where it is like a developer that has a whole set of other assets available to it, like pseudo-human individuals, like intelligent agents that are autonomous, that you give to do things in a similar sense to the way we think about outsourcing today. Like I give it a set of requirements, it goes out and does those. I come back in the morning and I take that and I incorporate it into my application. Like at some point, it's going to get kind of to that spot. It's not there yet, but that's where we have to start sort of preparing ourselves as AI-enabled developers in order to be able to function in that particular space. Like, Brian, what's been your experience of it, like as a force multiplier in like a very like practical sense?
Well, I mean, you're getting to the next slide. We're going to talk about like, what it actually does.
There you go.
But my experience is that it's probably about 50%. It increases my productivity about 50%. I'm not wasting a lot of time, doing remedial, kind of programming tasks. I don't have to skeleton out like unit tests when I'm working on it, and overall, I can just focus on the more creative aspects of what I'm trying to accomplish. Like, what is the actual problem that I'm trying to solve here, rather than all these other like nuanced things that I'm dealing with. On the previous slide, I think like one of the things I wanted to talk about, all right, fine, bring it back here. But you kind of skipped a little bit over the 90-10 rule. Yeah, I would say like, it's not perfect. I wouldn't, try to throw some really complex business logic at it and say, write me a method that does, these 18 things. But it's really good, and you will have to review it. Another thing to note is that there are differences between the ChatGPT models that are being used in conjunction with personas and the Copilots. So, some developers like to run it by both and see which gets a better result. That's just going to improve, and especially when you can start to ground your repos to Copilot and actually get results that are relevant to your internal development repos. It's just going to get even better. So that's, and then we can go back and talk a little bit about the results. So the overall, across the industry, I mean, we're looking at a really high degree of productivity increases. Some people are saying, up to, 70%, productivity increase. And, I've heard comments about like, well, I'm a developer, and if I have, if I get 50% more work done, that just means I have more work that I have to do. And I think that's kind of a misguided way of looking at it. To me, I look at it as, I don't have to waste my time writing a bunch of this boilerplate stuff. I can start to think about the critical problems and do a better job and investigate, like, what are some of the edge cases that I need to consider in this particular task or this particular part of the program that I'm trying to develop. So it gives you more time to like actually think through problems, rather than writing a bunch of remedial code or, just boilerplate code.
So you want to start by maybe just kind of talk through some of the common tasks that you're seeing people be successful with Copilot? This is a pretty exhaustive list, but like talk through the ones in this that you think are like really big hitters.
Yeah, so some of this isn't out there yet, right? Like this list comes from like a comprehensive list of things that you'll be able to do. So like the pull request documentations, that's all enterprise features that are coming out. But where I've used it in the past is I've got this entity framework data model, and I want to write like some CRUD operations against that. I can point it at that class and say, help me write some, read methods for, getting an element with the specific ID. Or writing my unit tests. I mean, nobody likes writing unit tests. I mean, no developer does. We all hate it. But it not only creates like good, like just general coverage ones, but it can actually start to think about some of those edge cases, right? So when I'm, looking for values that are out of bounds and things, it thinks through those problems and creates, fantastic unit tests. And also like just having it with the chat window, constantly monitoring what you're working on. It can pick up on some pretty subtle things that you might miss when you're writing code. Those are probably the three biggest things that I use it for.
Awesome. All right. So talk a little bit about like the IDEs and the experience and what practically this looks like before we go into some of the demos, Brian.
Well, so it is supported. I mean, I use mostly Visual Studio in Visual Studio Code for my development environment, and it's integrated 100% into it with the Copilot. It used to be called Copilot X, now it's just Copilot. Now that's completely integrated into the IDE. It's chat window that sits on the side, and it works with the models that have been provided for it. What you're going to see in Enterprise is with Copilot Enterprise is the ability to ground those code repos that live within your GitHub account, your GitHub organization, and it'll become aware of these other patterns and practices and code examples so that it can provide more meaningful, feedback for you or more better examples for you. Again, I mean, you see the JetBrains up here. To me, it's like it's the best version of JetBrains that I could imagine in terms of being able to give you suggestions and improvements in your code.
Awesome. You just kind of covered this a little bit. I think this is really an exciting next step. The whole GitHub Copilot Enterprise, the ability for it to have more awareness of your actual code base and not be just genericized, I think is going to be a big step forward for our ability to explainability, just to like, hey, I'm going in and looking at this. What is it? What does this mean? But also being able to tailor to how we're developing in our organization versus maybe how someone else has developed. There's multiple good ways to do something. I think that's going to be a really exciting next step for that as well.
Yeah, I would add to this too that this is a differentiator in terms of what your organizational approach is to GitHub. So about 7 or 8 months ago, internally here at Concurrency, we talked about, well, should we really go to GitHub, Enterprise, or should we just stick with, the standard licensing? And at the time, we kind of like, well, there isn't really anything in the enterprise stuff that we really need. Yeah, it's nice to get the Active Directory integration. Maybe get a little bit extra compute cycles out of it. But now it's not even a discussion. I mean, if you want the enterprise, if you want these Copilot enterprise features, which are going to be hugely beneficial, massively beneficial to be able to ground towards your repos, be able to have these pull request summaries, and other features that are being offered as part of this, it's a no-brainer that enterprise is the way to go.
All right, so let's talk about a couple examples here. So maybe talk through this first one, Brian.
Yeah, so I mean, this is kind of the boilerplate thing, right? I want to create a data structure. I want to create some code around this data structure that I have, and maybe this is. I can't talk to this example per se because this is not my language, but essentially, like, yeah, you can just point it at a classic description of the data structure that I'm looking for, and boom, that just gets put out right into your window. Natural language description. I've got a give me a data structure for a person, and it's going to come up with first name, last name, all on its own. Things like that are really beneficial.
I found it interesting how you could either use the chat interface like this and like describe what you want, or if you just kind of like started building it in the interface, it will start suggesting the next thing, like name, last name, first name, last name, address. It starts to kind of like anticipate what it is that you are building and suggesting the next things in that list.
Yeah, and then I always start here, and then I'll take it to the next level, right? So now I've got this class here, and I can continue to prompt it for service classes or create an interface that allows me to do these other things. And it has that context of the code that I'm already working with, similar to like how you'd have the context of the questions that you previously asked for in like your traditional chat GPT sessions, right? So to me, like I can get from an idea to maybe an API exposing some of this within 15 minutes, versus what it might have taken me an hour or so to do it before.
I'll say a total like side thing, like dad moment. Like I have found that in addition to this being really useful just for like general development, it's great for teaching people coding.
Yeah,
Like I put my son in front of this and was like, here, just describe what you want. And he starts him down the road of like, he's not having to start completely from scratch or Googling it. It's just been awesome.
Yeah, and similar to that, like when you're working with a new technology, let's say that you want to do some HoloLens development, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you've got some ideas about how you do it, but you don't really want to go through and read a bunch of documentation about how do I get started. I mean, you could use it for that kind of stuff as well, because there's a ton of examples that are built into these models for these emerging technologies, or maybe not emerging technologies, but things that you might not be familiar with. So it's not only a great learning tool for somebody that's new to programming, but it's an excellent learning tool for people that are trying to dive into a new technology stack or some new components.
So this next guy is about writing unit tests. Talk a little bit about like how you see this working.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I already did.
Yeah, you did. That's
To
true.
kind of recap it, but this is a good, this just a good visual of how it actually works. So when I write when I use it to prompt for unit tests, I'll usually actually get like 3 or 4 methods out of it, test methods out of it, so that it increases the coverage of my methods that I'm trying to test. But it's that easy. Just type it in, boom, here's your unit tests. Click a button, it goes into your code, you're done.
Oddly enough, I think the chat interface in and of itself has been a nice like step forward. We've become really intuitive with it on other use cases, and it being now part of the like development experience you don't have to just kind of learn how to use it in the IDE itself. There's sort of side loading this chat experience I think is really helpful.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely.
Okay. Another example of just like, hey, I want to get, kind of goes back to that, never have to create a draft again. Like, how do I do this? Instead of Googling it, using the interface, how do I build this? Give me a prompt, help me figure out how to take the next step on this particular type of thing.
Yeah, and this is great for developers that I'm not one of these developers that uses like Git in the command line. I'm not a command line developer, so shoot me. But this is a great way for command line developers who like a lot of these functions, like create a new button, like your IDE might have something like go hit this widget. But this is a little bit more effective or efficient for developers that are really command line programmers.
I think the idea of documenting pull requests is rockstar. Like this kind of stuff is like nobody likes documenting these. Nobody likes writing this kind of thing. Nobody even likes writing documentation in general. Like the ability for it to summarize something that I did is one of the like most clear and obvious, even if you didn't like want to use it in line as you're doing work, just the take this off my plate part of it is fantastic.
Yeah, and if you do this intentionally, you're going to see that it's going to allow you to think through, okay, this is what it thinks I did. Is that right? Because the
Yeah.
impressions that, the impressions that AI has probably going to be the same impressions that somebody that's looking at it for the first time is. So, did I write this code clearly so that it's picked up by the AI and describes it accurately?
Same idea with commit messages.
Yep.
In basic pattern. I thought this was really cool. This like idea of give me suggestions to make this better. I like that they're taking it not just the like here's what you could do, but even like click on this to make it to replace what you previously had with what we're suggesting.
Yeah, exactly. And this goes back to like that whole, JetBrains and refactor. I would use that, constantly. And I don't use it anymore ever, because this is way more efficient. Yeah, so we mentioned this. This is a feature that's coming out. We haven't had a chance to play with it yet, but this is about grounding your repos in GitHub and being able to use your internal data, similarly to how we would ground internal documents, or how Copilot 365 is going to work. This just grounds your Copilot agent into your actual internal code base.
This is a scenario that I think the sky is the limit on. And this idea of code translation, we have so many customers we're working with that they have something old that was written in a certain language. They want to move to this new architecture. It may not be just like translate language 1 to language 2, but we're at the infancy of that. I find it really fascinating, A, that you can just move from one language to another and start like that. But B, like I think you could start to incorporate into this other creative approaches to optimize common activities versus having to just throw people energy at it. I don't know if you have more thoughts on that, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to see, just even using the tools out of the box to be able to do this, you're going to see like a 70% increase. Like imagine that you have a web forms, application, and you want to use a modern SPA framework, moving forward. I mean, it's just a lot of boilerplate, like look at the screen, make some stuff. And there's some tooling that can help you convert that. But this is going to accelerate it. But you'd have to do all that work. You'd have to create the new screen in Angular if you wanted to, convert it to Angular. And then after you did that, you'd have to think about what components am I going to make? Like, how am I going to decompose this to reusable components? Now, all your energy is just going to be spent on that. And you're also going to wind up getting, tips and suggestions from Copilot as well. So when you're doing a conversion or you're trying to get rid of some end of life components, this is going to, make that job, I don't know about infinitely easier, because we're trying to reduce it. So maybe infinity doesn't apply, but it will definitely accelerate.
Same kind of situation with code improvement, right?
Yeah.
And one thing I like about the interface of the code improvement is like side A, side B. I like how it presents it visually. And I also like that you can like adopt what you want. Like you don't necessarily have to like take everything. But it's almost like having your own code review before you actually do the code review,
Yeah.
or even applying this during code reviews.
100%.
And then I think the last one I got on this, which I just thought was really kind of fun, which is like explain the code like I'm a 5-year-old. And because sometimes we just like we're looking at something we don't even know what we're looking at. Like, what is this? What is the point of this thing? And it being something that could like I'm entering this code base for the first time. Describe me what this is even trying to accomplish, and have it remark that back to me and have me have some perspective of what someone was actually working on here. So I stuck this at the sample program that I was working on. So kind of idea of explain this to me like I'm a 5-year-old. Okay, so let's just talk about like things to know if you're trying to get started with this. Like if you're trying to enable your development team to be AI enabled developers, what are some things that you need to know as you get started? So what it is, you go ahead, Brian. Sorry.
I was just gonna say we had a question if this was going to be the death of COBOL. Where's that last? I mean, it was already dying, so maybe it's just for all the Packer fans, it's the dagger, per se. But right, maybe too soon after the Packers, but nonetheless, what it is, what it isn't. Yeah, like I said, this is a tool that's going to go in my toolbox and never come out, or at least not until something better comes around. It is just going to improve your productivity in terms of getting the day-to-day kind of like mundane tasks taken care of. But again, just to call out, it's not a replacement for a developer. It's not that good. You still need people that are going to critically think through the problems, but it's going to give you more time to do that. And so I think you will see a productivity boost in terms of like, can I get through like these user stories and increase my team's velocity? But I think the more measurable benefit is going to be the quality of the software that you're developing. So you're going to see fewer bugs. You're going to see people thinking through the critical problems more. And so that I think is the biggest improvement.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. Okay, this part can be a little wonky, the like getting the account stuff, especially since it's not like just immediately integrated into your Active Directory. You want to just talk about that a little second? Like if someone doesn't have it right now, like what does that process look like?
Yeah, so I mean, we probably need about 20 minutes to talk through what the entire process is.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you're going to need a GitHub account and a GitHub organization that's set up in order for you to enable Copilot for your organization. So if you're using DevOps today, that you're going to need to start using GitHub. So you're going to want to set up an organization. And then there's a decision to be made about whether or not you want to take advantage of the enterprise. You're going to have a choice between basic licensing and enterprise licensing. And, I would strongly encourage everybody to consider the enterprise licensing because it'll give you the ability to ground your Copilot instance to your internal repos. Most development work is using Git repositories anyways. So you can still continue to use ADO, but in terms of housing your repositories, you're going to want to move that to GitHub, moving forward.
Awesome. We talked about IDs already. Just a little bit of a comparison of like the per user cost per month. So enterprise is certainly more expensive, but certainly worth it. Like just the ability to ground is a pretty huge advancement. So yeah, that's on the wait list. It's coming soon though. I mean, talking February, which is like days away.
Yep.
There is an interesting button in Copilot. Do you want to just talk about like the copyrighted material thing? That's because this is a common concern.
Yeah, it is. It's literally just a button. But so if your organization has policies around using open source code or copyrighted material, GitHub or Copilot has taken care of that problem, addressing concerns. So it will look for any of the code suggestions that it's made that would match public sources and potentially be in violation. And so this is part of your organizational settings and would be applied to everybody that was using it. So if you feel like this is something you don't want to do because of the potential copyright risks, this is a way that you could avert that.
What I think is funny about this one is it's like I mean, it's an advancement, right? But
Yeah.
everybody does this already anyway. Like they're already copying and pasting stuff from like public repos. um, but I think it's neat that it's almost like building that out of my environment in a sense.
Yep.
Okay. So we're going to transition the conversation now. We just talked a lot about like using AI to be an enabled developer in the sort of high code sense. We're going to move into like the semi code space, the more like self-service development area, talking about Copilot Studio. In Copilot Studio, if you think about the previous graphic that we had, this is like your full code developer track. What's happening in the sort of low code, no code, semi code sort of space is adjacent to that. You're seeing similar advancements. If you have listened to any of the talks that Charles Larama has given, the Steve VP at Microsoft who owns Power Apps, he has a goal. His like North Star is to make developing applications as easy as building a PowerPoint. Like that PowerPoints right now are just like something anybody can do, right? He wants building applications and presenting data to be something that is as easy for an individual to do as building a PowerPoint presentation. And it's not quite there yet, but you can see how they're making progress. So, simple Power Apps development, we've been seeing that happen a long time, or any kind of low code, no code sort of space, right? There's these sort of middle tier of applications that we're seeing advance in their capability. We're seeing even full scale development capabilities like ML ops and DevOps start to be part of that picture. But what you're also starting to see is that English language centric development, or even translated language centric development, is starting to enter into how people are building applications, even in the sense that we used it in the GitHub Copilot space. Power Apps and other capabilities in Copilot Studio are starting to do the same thing. So what we're going to talk about is especially Copilot Studio, and we'll just kind of intro a little bit of what they're even doing in Power Apps to achieve efficiency for the whole community that wants to build applications that are in that sort of middle zone or even higher as they start to become very capable. So one thing that I think is really cool, you can go to make.powerapps right now to try this out, which is you can describe the app you want it to build, and it will start that application for you. Now, there's a whole lot it doesn't do. Like, I think it's very much in its infancy, but it's very exciting just to think about the idea of what would it mean if individuals were able to build these themselves to track their ideas or to take action on something they think is possible. So I just went out there and said, I want to track an app that will track AI ideas, because we do this all the time. Like, we're meeting with customers, executive teams, we're building these lists of AI ideas, and then we're articulating that back out. We want to build an app for it. So let's build a Power App. So the app could capture the name, category, description, revenue production, operational savings, priority, and dependencies. I can put that in a spreadsheet, but historically, like, most people couldn't put that into an application. Now with Power Apps, you can. So it immediately takes that, builds this table, builds the interface that will exist for it to be able to function as an application. And then, as one thing I thought was really neat about it is side loaded into the experience are this ability to edit as I went. So for example, I said add a column for tracking if it produces new revenue and how much per year. But then I noticed, like, oh shoot, it just wasn't on the screen. Like, there's a slider here, and it was over hidden on the other side of the screen. So then I had two columns for that same thing. So I said undo it, like undo the change, and it removed it because I hadn't put any data there yet. I found the interface to be very intuitive and something that just like any general individual would be able to take advantage of. So I think it's really exciting where the ability to create applications is going, and how we can drop that down to other levels of our organizations to enable them to be makers as well. And this is happening as well inside of the Power Automate space. So the ability to describe what you want, have it build the workflow that I intentionally am interested in, have it make the connections and even make adjustments to those based upon the chat experience on the right-hand side. So essentially walking a individual through being a developer, but not having to put the, like, oh, the only way you get to develop things is as you learn to code. Like, no, I think what's going to happen is more and more often the creative skill is what's going to really be accentuated within us, whether you know how to write that code in full code or not. And this is going to enable everyone to be able to participate within the development process. And now what we're going to do is, AJ, you're going to kind of start talking through a little bit about Copilot Studio. And this is really exciting. Like what they have done, like I don't know if any of you have played with Power Virtual Agents before, but like the difference between Power Virtual Agents and what you can now do in Copilot Studio is pretty stunning. So AJ, take it away. I'd love for you to talk through this. And AJ is also going to demo a couple examples of what you can do.
Thanks, Nate. So let me just share my screen real quick. Okay. So we talked a little bit about like the app and the automation side of low code, and now let's take a look at what is Copilot Studio. So Copilot Studio was something which Microsoft introduced as part of last year's Ignite, and it is a low code platform that allows you to build intelligent chatbots using either generative AI or even your own custom data source. So it was something which Microsoft introduced last year, and it's kind of an extension to Power Virtual Agent with a lot of additional capabilities like generative AI and all those things. So, but you do have the ability to kind of enable or disable those functionalities as well if you would like, but it gives a lot of tons of capabilities for that. So on the right hand side, you can see an example of a screenshot of how the Copilot Studio look like. So you don't have to like write any additional code in order to build any of these interface, and you can purely build the logic based on the graphical interface and then kind of like navigate through the different topics. So you can kind of like connect your chat GPTs or like, generative AI, or if you would like to build any custom logic with just the graphical interface without any code. So you can definitely do that as well. And then if you want to like connect to a system like an SAP Dynamics 365, Salesforce, or any of those data, if you want to like bring that to the chatbot, so you do have the ability to do that as well. So there are over 1100 plus pre-built plugins available in Copilot Studio. So you can use any one of those. You can also use Power Automate to kind of like bring data from an external source back to Copilot Studio. So you can either do that, or if you want to like use advanced development capabilities, you can also build a custom plugin and then connect it back to the Copilot Studio. So that way, either you can bring data from your own customized data source, or you can additionally use generative AI functionality to kind of like look at data from public websites or internal websites like SharePoint and things like that. So it gives a lot of additional capabilities of which Power Virtual Agent did not have previously. So it's a really cool thing where users can kind of like interact on a daily basis, make their day-to-day life a bit more productive. So going into a little bit about the architecture side of things. So Copilot Studio definitely comes with the authentication side of things. So you can use Active Directory or like single sign-on functionality as well in order to authenticate and make sure that the bot is communicating with users who have right access. So that is definitely a functionality with Copilot Studio. And in addition to that, you do have the ability to add additional policies. Like for example, there is data loss prevention policies that you can set up at the tenant level and the environment level. So that way you can restrict or allow certain authentication, certain connectors, and all those things. So the Copilot Studio is built on top of Dataverse and Microsoft Power Platform. So it allows you to kind of like make sure that only the right authentication, or if you want to disable HTTP connectors, you can do that. So you do have the additional ability to allow and disable those connectors. So it comes with a lot of additional data policies as well. And then if you take a look at some of how the conversation works. So it is built on top of Azure bot service, and then whenever you set up a bot, it already comes with some system generated entities. So entities are basically how the bot understand what the user is talking about, like for example, age, color, all those numbers. And so that really helps the bot understand what the user is talking about. So by default, whenever you set up a bot, it already comes with bunch of uh, system generated entities. But in addition to that, if you would like to add additional logics where you want to bring in your business entities or like business specific conditions or like logic, so you do have the ability to create the custom as well. So that way the bot will kind of like understand what the user is asking about and then accordingly navigate the conversation. And if you look at the generative AI side of things, so this is a feature which was not available with Power Virtual Agent and with this Copilot Studio. So you do have the ability to enable that functionality. But if you do not want to like use generative functionality, so you have the ability to disable that as well. So if you enable, you can add up to 4 custom sites, or like if you want to like add internal sites like SharePoint and OneDrive, so you do have the ability to do that as well. But if you want to like disable that, you can totally do that and then create custom logic using just graphical interface without any code, and then navigate through the conversation. So it comes with a lot of additional logic as well. And in addition to that, you can trigger various connectors like 1100 plus pre-built connectors that are already available. So you can either use those or create custom connectors, or you can also use Power Automate in order to fetch data from an external system like Dynamics 365 or SAP and all those things. And at any point of time, if you want to escalate to an actual agent, so you do have the ability to do that as well. So you can escalate it to a different application like Dynamics 365 customer service or ServiceNow or any of those tools. So you do have the ability to escalate, and the agent will have the live chat or whatever the user have typed so far. So they will be able to get that information as well. So it gives a lot of abilities. And then you can kind of like connect the Copilot Studio to different places. Like for example, you can connect it in Microsoft Teams so that it is easy for the users to kind of like get that information and then chat on a daily basis. So you do have all the abilities to connect to different platforms as well. And since everything is built on top of Dataverse and Power Platforms, so it makes it really easy for rapid development of the bots, and then kind of like deploy it to higher environment and then production use, and then you can do in an iterative approach to improve the performance as well. So it really makes the bot development and then deployment relatively easy. So if you look at a little bit about why Copilot Studio, so usability is one of the great advantage of using Copilot Studio. So you are basically using literally no code, and then using graphical builder, you can create all the custom logics and everything. So that is one of the biggest advantage, and you do not actually require a developer or a data scientist to build all the OpenAI. So all these things are done natively in the Copilot Studio, and it has the ability to understand the natural language capabilities, and then it can kind of like reuse content. So if you created one custom logic, you can reuse throughout different contexts as well. So that makes the life of the developers or like whoever's building the bot easy as well. And if you look at the productivity side of things, you can, since it is built on top of Power Platform, so you can easily improve the bot performance by looking at the analytics feature that is available in Copilot Studio. So you can, look at the performance, analyze, and then make iterative approaches to improve and increase the performance and add additional functionality. And you can also add that to Microsoft Teams, so that makes it is pretty easy to use as well. And if you look at the extensibility side of things, so even though Copilot Studio is a low-code tool, so it doesn't mean that you cannot use pro code. So you definitely have the ability to create custom plugins, and you can connect that to your data source, and the chatbot should be able to retrieve that information. So all those additional pro dev extensibility feature can also be used in Copilot Studio. And it already comes with 1100 plus connectors, and it is easy to kind of like integrate with other Power Platform tools like Power App, Power Pages, and all those things. So it's pretty easy to kind of like connect and do those things. And finally, if you look at the scalability side of things, so you can easily reuse some of the content throughout the bot, and then you can look at the analytics side of things to improve the performance, and then kind of like doing an iterative approach to deploy to higher environment. So these are some of the reasons why Copilot Studio might be beneficial for your organization. Let's take a quick look at how the generative answers consideration and how that works. So, like I mentioned, generative AI functionality is something which you can enable or disable for the bot. So, if you disable the generative AI functionality, then in that scenario, you can create custom logic, and that would kind of like navigate the conversation throughout the bot. But if you enable the generative AI functionality, so you can connect to public data like our public website. So you can add to your chatbot. So currently, the limit to add is up to 4 URLs for the public website. And then in case of SharePoint, so you can add up to 4 SharePoint URLs. So there is this kind of like the condition or like limit currently that is available, and then you can go up to 2 sub pages as well currently. And in addition to that, you do have the ability to connect your Azure OpenAI on your data as well in order to generate generative AI response. So you can definitely do that as well as a part of generative AI functionality. In addition to that, if you want to like upload certain text related documents like Word document and all those things, so you can upload that as well to the chat GPT or like, or Copilot Studio, and then the bot will be able to kind of like retrieve information from that uploaded document. So that is again another way to kind of like retrieve or generate generative AI response. And finally, you can create custom data. So using HTTP requests or Power Automate, you can kind of like get that information and bring it back to uh, Copilot Studio to generate the response. So this way, you can kind of like retrieve all those information from various sources, and then you can, Azure OpenAI would kind of like do the summarization side of things, and then response validation happen, and then it is returned to the Copilot Studio as response. And finally, if you look at some of the channel integration and how the handoff works, so you can easily integrate the Copilot Studio in Microsoft Teams or like in a custom website. So you can definitely do that. And like in Facebook, mobile apps, so all those things are compatible, and you can kind of like extend and add the Copilot Studio bot to all these different platforms. And at any point of time, if you want to kind of like seamlessly transfer that to a live agent with all the context, so you can definitely do that as well. So you can give the conversation or move the conversation to Dynamics 365 customer service, service now, or like all these different engagement hubs as well. So this will really help the agent have the context of what the user was talking about, and then accordingly hand it over. So a little bit about some of the use cases and how some of these things can be used within the organization. So in this scenario, I have kind of like added two different sites. One is for an internal SharePoint site, and in addition to that, I've also added a public website. And using generative AI, it will kind of get the response. So before I go into the live demo, just kind of like showing. So it's kind of like asked, how do I reset my password? It looked at the internal SharePoint site and returned with the URLs that would directly take you to that appropriate page. And then in this scenario, you can see that I asked like a concurrency help with data and AI project. So it looked at the concurrency public website and returned the results along with the URL. So this way you can, for the same chatbot, you can kind of like connect both public sites as well as internal sites as well. And another example is, so you can also create or like read records from a different system using Copilot Studio and Power Automate. So in this scenario, I'm creating an order record in Dynamics 365 from the Copilot Studio by just entering a couple of information. So this way, users can kind of like without having to go to multiple systems, you can directly go ahead and create records in multiple systems. And finally, another thing would be, you can easily integrate to Microsoft Teams, and that would allow you to kind of like, chat directly from Teams. A quick look at how the portal looks like. So copilotstudio.microsoft.com is the portal which you can use for using the Copilot Studio. And you can see that I've created a bot, test bot, concurrency bot. And in here, you can see if you go to the generative AI side of things, so you can see I have added few public websites as well as one internal website. And so this is the place where you can kind of like test all those functionality, and you do have the ability to kind of like connect this to teams or different channels as well. So let's take a look at how it works. So I'm just going to type who is concurrency. So what it does is, so since we have the website, our public website added, so it pretty much went to that location, and then it returned what concurrency does, and then some results as well. So if I go to the URL, so you can see that even though I added just concurrency.com, it went to about us and then returned that result. So it's a good way to kind of like see how that conversation went, and you can see that these are some of the connectors that got triggered automatically, and then it went ahead and returned those results. Another thing which you can check is, so I'm going to check something regarding internal SharePoint site. So I'm going to check how to reset my password. So right now, we are going to look at the internal SharePoint side in order to get the result. So you can see that it returned to reset your password. You can go to password reset page and answer a few security questions. So if I go to the URL, so you can see that how there's a question or like with answers for FAQ, which says like, how do I reset the password? So it pretty much looked at the SharePoint location and then returned that result. And in addition to that, so like I mentioned, you can also add documents to the Copilot Studio that will allow you to get that result. So if I go ahead and ask something like, is there a process for So I'm just checking if there's a process for emergency leave. So all these information are attached to a document, Word document. So you can see that it returned the Word document URL. And when you click that, it will even download to your system. So this way you can easily access. So you can see that in the document section, I've added like few documents. So this way Copilot Studio allows to kind of like get that information and return back. And another scenario which I just want to quickly show is how you can trigger Power Automate to kind of like talk with a different system and then return results. So I'm just going to type create purchase order. So it pretty much asks like what's my email address. So I'm just going to type my email address. So now it asks like which device would I like to place order for. So if I type laptop, so it will go ahead and create a record in a different system and it will return back with the order ID. And if I go to Dynamics 365, so now you can see that a new record got created just now. So this way, now from the chat experience, you can directly interact with multiple systems and then get the results, or you can even use this for record creation or updation and all those things.
Awesome. Thank you, Ajay. That was fantastic. Okay, so we want to make sure that we wrap this up. The two things I want to make sure I show you. This is like a total handwritten document, but I think it helps to understand how this all fits together. So many of you are starting to take advantage of M365 Copilot. M365 Copilot can sit inside of this picture and answer questions. You could also have an individual interacting with a Copilot Studio based application directly from within Teams, or it can plug into the M365 Copilot experience. So it can function as a plugin between these two agents. So that can fit together. And then some of our companies we're working with, they're also spinning up like custom GPTs that are akin to Copilot Studio, and or maybe it's a specific use case that answers specific kinds of things really well. And that also can fit into the entire picture. So all these sort of fit inside of the same space. And eventually, as we kind of walk forward here, what you're going to find is that Copilot, Copilot Studio apps, full code ML apps built inside of Azure AI Studio to do certain custom GPTs are all going to interact with each other through the vehicles of plugins. And sometimes you might be hitting them directly from Teams. Sometimes you might be hitting them from Copilot. But what you're trying to create is an ecosystem where all of this is in the same sandbox. You're trying to have all these talk together in the same space. And in a good sense, the architecture exists for that to happen, but it needs to also be intentional that like people aren't just like creating all their own things. There's a way for this all to be brought together. So we've talked about how it makes a difference. How do you get going with this? There's a couple ways that I'd like to suggest, and they're in your sort of call to action form. First is we would love to sit with your team to help you get started with GitHub Copilot, with Copilot Studio, to help this become an asset to you, to be a partner to your dev organization. This is something we do quite a bit. We're not a staff log business. We bring high scale capabilities to customers to help them to accelerate their own teams. And this is an opportunity for us to be a partner to you in that space to envision this. And we'll invest in the envisioning to help you think about how can you use Copilot Studio? Where are the business opportunities? How can I use Copilot in GitHub to be able to accelerate my development team in a very practical way and experiment where that can be path forward. We also can help you evaluate and take action on that scenario. Some cases we're seeing companies say, how can you accelerate like moving from this thing I have to this thing I have? Or how can you accelerate these types of activities of my particular developers to help them be able to use this as a normative way of doing work within your organization? And then ultimately, your goal is to move this into a scaled production norm as the teams become very comfortable with it. So our goal is to help you get there. So our call to action is what we love to start with is just that group envisioning session. That's us investing in you to learn more about your process and your organization. And we'd love to take that step. So as you close down today, please take the time to fill out the survey. A, we just want to know how you like the session. And B, we love to know what we can do better, and C, we want to help you. So if it'd be worthwhile us spending some time together learning about your organization, please indicate that in the form, and we'd love to take that action. So we hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Thank you for going a little bit long, and thank you especially to Brian and Ajay for the activities that you walked through today.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.